So I want to welcome everybody to our, gosh, I don't know what number this is, almost 2 full years of Sunday Mornings with Twitchy Women. And today we have Bradley McDaniels, PhD, CRC. What does CRC mean?
Certified Rehabilitation Counselor.
Aha, okay. Dr. McDaniels is an assistant professor in rehabilitation and health services in the College of Health and Public Service at the University of North Texas. And he's a big fan of Viktor FRANKL, and
Yes.
he will tell you all about that. He will be speaking to us about living a meaningful life with Parkinson's disease. And if I can find his bio, there it is. Prior to joining University of North Texas, he earned his PhD from the University of Kentucky in rehabilitation counseling and accepted an advanced rehabilitation research and training postdoctoral fellowship appointment with a focus on Parkinson's disease at Virginia Commonwealth University. He's been personally affected by Parkinson's disease, and he will tell you about that as part of his story, so I'm not going to go into it here. His research interests include positive psychology. His interests include positive psychology, psychosocial adaptation, quality of life, meaning in life, and apathy in people with Parkinson's disease. So welcome, Dr. Bradley Daniels. And I am going to turn it over so that you can share your screen. Okay, so welcome, Dr. Bradley McDaniels.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the warm welcome, Sharon, and I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you all today. I'm going to start and just share a little bit about how I got here, right? You know, most people, when I'm doing research and I meet people with Parkinson's, their questions are, why are you interested in Parkinson's disease? And so I spent nearly 20 years in the pharmaceutical industry and very unfulfilling career, to be quite frank. But about 9.5 years ago, my mom was diagnosed with Parkinson's. And so at 40, gosh, that would have been 42, 43, I realized I was a little too old to go to medical school and become a neurologist. I really didn't want to spend the next 14 years in school. So I said, what's the next best thing? And thought PhD sounds reasonable. And I ran across the field of rehabilitation counseling, rehabilitation psychology, kind of serendipitously. It's really a field that helps people adjust to chronic illness and disability. That's what it was designed to do. And it was a perfect fit. And I realized as a 42, 3, 4-year-old that I absolutely loved school and fell in love with learning about a variety of different chronic illnesses and really entrenching myself in the Parkinson's disease community. And as Sharon said, you know, I have very fortunately gotten connected with Dr. Indu Subramanian, who many of you probably know. She has been very instrumental in not only my career, but in my development as a researcher. And she and I have been doing a fair amount of work together. And it's really how Sharon and I got connected. She goes to Dr. Subramanian, and one thing led to another, and we got hooked up. So that's a little bit of background of where I come from and how I got here. So my interests in you all in this disease are, let's face it, they're somewhat selfish, because my goal was always to help my mom. And I hope that through my research, not only she, but that you all are able to benefit from some of the things that we find along the way. And you know, we find in research, it's baby steps. I don't anticipate anytime soon somebody finding anything earth-shattering on Parkinson's disease and finding a drug that cures it or delays the progression. We're just not there. But we can find some of these things that make a difference in your day-to-day life. So that's a little bit about me. So here we are, living a meaningful life with PD. I'm going to talk a little bit about what meaning in life is, what it's not, why do we even care, and then how do we get it, right? Those are kind of the operative questions that we need to discuss along the way. So Sharon mentioned Viktor FRANKL. he is, if you guys don't know Viktor Frankl, I strongly encourage you to get the book Man's Search for Meaning. It's a phenomenal book about a man's struggle through Nazi concentration camps and losing his whole family, coming out on the other side and beginning the rest of his career talking about the role that meaning played in getting him through that. So here are a couple of things that Viktor Frankl said. When we are no longer able to change a situation, we're challenged to change ourselves. Makes sense, right? We get a diagnosis of PD, we can't change that situation. We have an opportunity to change ourselves and the way that we look at that situation. Those who have a why to live for can bear almost anyhow. So the why is your purpose. If we have a purpose and we can figure out what that is in our lives, the things that happen to us are less troublesome, if you will, because we become focused on this why. This is my purpose, and I can deal with these things that come. In some ways, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment one finds meaning. Meaning changes us, and it doesn't change the situation, but it changes our view of the situation. And that's all we really have control over. Life is never made unbearable by circumstances, but only by a lack of meaning and purpose. That's a pretty powerful statement. We all, at some points in our lives, are going to face circumstances that are dire, circumstances that are awful, quite frankly. But when we have meaning and purpose, we're able to somehow get through those and frequently surmount those and come out better on the other side. The last one I have from him, it is here that we encounter the central theme of existentialism. To live is to suffer. To survive is to find meaning in that suffering. We're all going to suffer in life. That's what I was saying just a few minutes ago. And how do we deal with that? That's kind of the premise for this talk. And that's how I began developing this idea of meaning and Parkinson's and what role it plays. So here are some things that you guys know all too well. Diagnosed with PD, the question is now what, right? Everything changes, at least in our minds, in that moment when the doctor says you have Parkinson's disease. Some that I talk to tell me life is over. My life as I used to know it is no longer, and now everything is going downhill. It doesn't have to be that way, but that's a comment that I hear from time to time. What about my work, right? What about people who are still employed, particularly the young onset folks, people who are diagnosed at less than 50? What do I do now that that's happening? What about my relationships, friendships I had? You know, maybe there's concern about this tremor that I have or my unsteady gait, and I'm uncomfortable going out in social settings. How's that going to affect these relationships that I have? Everything changes, but what about your meaning? Does meaning in life change after a Parkinson's diagnosis, death of a spouse, move across the country, loss of a career, right? You could fill in the blank and we can keep going and going on that. But finding meaning in these times is the one component that you'll see by the end of this. I hope that you'll see what it does for us. This last point is really important. Research indicates that traumatic life events may result in changes to one's meaning in life. I don't claim that everyone who has a Parkinson's disease diagnosis doesn't have meaning in life. It's not at all what I'm saying. But according to the research, many people who go through these types of experiences do suffer this existential crisis, right? This life and death change, who I am and what am I here to do? And now what am I going to do? And right, all of these things start swirling around in your head, and it can cause neuroses or this chronic anxiety that many in our world right now are struggling with. So let's before I proceed into the meaning in life, I want to talk about a couple of concepts that are important to understand, just to bring some context around what I'm talking about. So global meaning. Meaning is about forming mental representations of the world to aim to identify possible relationships. So global meaning is, what do I think the world is about? Who do I think people in the world are? How is it organized? Is it good? Is it bad? Those are the things that we begin very early in life at forming these beliefs. A lot of it is based on culture. A lot of it is based on the social relationship, the family that we grow up in. So we begin forming these early on. That's the second point. Meaning it's constructed. It's a decision that we make, and each one of us has the opportunity to make those constructed meanings. And we have these meaning frameworks. I kind of got ahead of myself, and I mentioned this culturally, socially, and societally. We begin to just understand what our place in the world is and how it operates. And the last one is meaning frameworks are complex web of propositions that we hold about how things in the world are and ought, that should say to be, and I have a typo and it says to me. So a little bit off there, but how do I think the world works? That's probably the summation of this. Do I think that the world is a dangerous place? Do I think that the world is a loving place? Right? All of these things, as you can imagine, depending on which view you take, will affect the way that you feel and the way that you interact with the world in general. So now we get into the psychology of meaning, some important concepts. One concept is meaning of life, and we're not going to talk about the meaning of life. That's a very difficult concept to walk through. Number one, we can't measure it with any tests, and so it's very difficult to study scientifically. So I don't really know what the meaning of life is for each one of you. And that's something that's a discussion for outside of this talk, but I want to differentiate meaning of life from meaning in life. Meaning in life is my meaning. What do I believe I am here for, and what makes my world operate in a good way? That's the focus of what my research is about. And we can measure that. And I'm going to talk about that here in just a few minutes. Areas of meaning. Right? There are a variety of places that people claim to find meaning, and there's been a decent amount of research talking about these areas. Some of the top ones, work, family, leisure, spirituality, relationships, right? There are a variety of these where we find meaning. And again, we're going to get into some more of this. And one area that is an interesting area of study is post-traumatic growth and meaning making. You guys may not be familiar with the term post-traumatic growth. Post-traumatic growth is the construct that looks at, after one goes through a traumatic situation, how do they come out on the other side? It kind of goes along with the term resilience, being able to bounce back in the face of adversity. But post-traumatic growth actually claims that not only do you come back after the event or the suffering that you went through, you don't come back to your baseline level. You actually come back better than you were before in a lot of ways. Hence the term growth, and not just return to an equilibrium. And then meaning making, right? That's what we're going to be talking about really today, is what do we do to find areas where we can make our life more meaningful? And it works for anybody, and it's really not that difficult. So what do we know about meaning in life? There are a few things that are important. So there are three things that make up one's belief about whether or not their life is meaningful. The first one is significance. Does my life matter? Is it worth it? Is there something that if I were gone, would some small place in this world miss the fact that I was gone, right? Do I matter? That's the significance piece. That's one of the three. The second one is coherence, the degree to which people perceive their life makes sense. Does the way that things are going in my life make sense with this global belief of what I have about how the world works? If I believe the world is a really good place and everyone loves each other, but I'm engaged in some type of work/activity that is counter to that, I'm probably not going to have much meaning in my life because those things aren't congruent with one another. So coherence to simply is just, does my life make sense? Things that are going on just kind of fit. And the last one is purpose. Do I have an overarching goal, something to reach for, something to strive for in my life? When we have all three of those things, you probably will score very high on a presence of meaning in life scale. And you probably will be experiencing some of the positive benefits that I'm getting ready to talk about.
When?
It's when we're lacking in one of these three areas that we begin to struggle. So according to Michael Steger, now Michael Steger is arguably the foremost guy who researches meaning in life. There are several, but he is among the most widely talked about. He's at Colorado State University. And he says meaning enables people to interpret and organize their experience, achieve a sense of their own worth and place, identify things that matter to them, and effectively direct their energies. That's kind of a long way of saying the things that I just said. It's looking at my life and saying, does it make sense? Do the things that I'm doing make sense in my life, the way that I'm living? Do I have a purpose? Do I feel like I matter to other people? Those things are important. So how do we measure it, right? That's one of the big questions. You know, the simple measure is me asking you, do you think your life has meaning? Yes or no, right? Now, that's a great question, but in the world of scientific research, that's really difficult because that's a very subjective answer and we can't quantify that. So for me to do a research study saying I just ask 100 people whether or not they think their life is meaningful and they answered yes or no, and I try to write that paper, nobody's going to publish it because the instrument or the questionnaire that I used wasn't validated and it just wasn't deep enough. So here are some other scales that have been developed just to give you an idea of how much research has gone on. Purpose and life scale, Krumbaum-Mahalik back in 1969. Sense of coherence scale, Antonovsky, 1983. Personal meaning profile, Paul Wong, 1998. Life Regard Index by Batista and Allman, 1973. Meaning in Life Questionnaire, Michael Steger, 2006. Multidimensional Existential Meaning Scale, George and Park, 2016. We've got a lot, right? This has been a very interesting topic for a really long time. But the research on meaning in life has really blown up in the last decade, maybe 12 years. Up until that, there was just a smattering of research articles talking about it, but it has really become at the forefront of a lot of health literature. What I can tell you we know today is any question that you ask about meaning in life, does meaning in life make X better? The answer is always yes. We've gotten to that place. Pick a disease state, talk about meaning in life, and it improves it. And we've largely got the data to show that. So question becomes, I was just curious. I had heard this, you know, how research meaning in life was several years ago. And it's one of the most predictive factors to having a good life. Now, again, that's a subjective term, right? Good life. What does that mean? Good to me might mean something very different than it does to you. But what matters is, do you think your life's good? And so I said, all right, I wonder how many people are researching this. Google Scholar is a website that's free. You can go to Google, you can go to any of the search engines and type in Google Scholar. and it'll bring up, it's a research page, basically. You type in anything you want, and it's going to pull up research articles that talk about that topic. So I just went to Google Scholar just this morning, and I typed in quality of life. Got 5.2 million articles that came up that talk about quality of life. You can imagine that's a big area, right? A lot of research. But look at meaning in life. It's not far behind. 3.8 million articles on meaning in life. Compared to depression, there are more articles on meaning in life than there are on depression. Yet you hear a whole lot more about depression, right? What about Parkinson's disease? 675,000. Meaning in life's a big deal. A lot of people are talking about it. And that's kind of where we got to where we're at now. So what do you get out of having meaning in life, right? What's the benefit to having more meaning in your life? Well, here are some of them. Better positive emotions, more joy, more love. Positive personality traits like extroversion and agreeableness are better. More positive adjustment, your life satisfaction, you're happier. Positive self-regard, your self-esteem is better, your self-worth is better. Positive self-management, ego strength, sense of control, responsibility about your life. You're more optimistic. You have better coping, less avoidance and more approach coping mechanisms. Not convinced? Higher meaning in life is associated with less physical decline and slower cognitive decline in older adults, less PTSD, lower blood pressure, lower negative affect, which is negative emotions, less depression, less anxiety, less suicidal ideation, less substance abuse, less need for therapy, and lower mortality. So you're thinking, so Brad, you're telling me that if I have more meaning in life that I'm going to live longer? That's what the literature says. There's a study done by Patricia Boyle. I think it was in 2009. She looked at two different groups of older adults, and one group had looked at the group that had the highest scores on meaning, and another group who had the lowest scores on meaning. And they looked at over a 5-year period, longitudinally, right? Looking outcomes based. And they found a 54% decrease in mortality for the group who had higher meaning in life. That's a big deal, right? I mean, these other things are great. Most of us would be happy just to have the rest of the list, right? Have those things get better in our lives. But actually being able to say that it decreases mortality, it's a pretty powerful statement. So does meaning in life matter? Thousands of studies. This is kind of a review, but it's important for me to say these things again. People with higher meaning in life are happier. They live more fulfilled lives. They have a more enjoyable life. They have better relationships. They're healthier, and they live longer. That's a pretty reasonable list. I'd probably take that list if you said, Brad, if you do these things, this is going to be the outcome. I would probably do whatever it is you told me to do to get that outcome, right? Those are pretty important characteristics. So the question is, all right, so you're telling us that if we have more meaning in life, that we have all these better outcomes, we live longer, we're happier, we're healthier, we have less depression, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's great, but how do we get it, right? That's the operative question. How do we go about finding meaning in life? So there are some formalized interventions that are available. There are specific therapeutic interventions. It's just called meaning therapy. Paul Wong is, he was actually a precursor to Michael Steger. Paul Wong was at the University of Toronto. I think he's emeritus, he's retired now. But he started meaning a long time ago, meaning therapy and study of meaning in life and existential concerns. many years ago, and it just didn't catch on for a while. But towards the end of his career, his work was widely cited by guys like Michael Steger and Crystal Park, who's out in Connecticut, who's another one of the big names. So meaning therapy, Paul Wong talks about the importance of relationships, right? That first quote, meaning is all we have, relationship is all we need. The importance of having people to connect with. And, you know, in talking with Sharon and Dr. Subramanian, learning about the group that you all have, I bet that many of you don't realize the value that you're getting out of this personal connection with other people who are similar to you. It's essential. You know, it prevents loneliness, which is a whole nother topic. Dr. Subramanian and I just wrote a chapter on loneliness for a neurology textbook and how that has affected people with Parkinson's disease during COVID. And it's been a big problem, as you all can imagine. Some of you may have experienced some of the issues. What we know is, one of the stats that I found that I'll share with you was, one study said that loneliness is more detrimental to a person's health than smoking, excessive drinking, obesity, and lack of exercise all combined. So one person who has all of those four things is not as bad as someone who lives lonely. That's a powerful statement. And that speaks to the importance of having different relationships with other people. We need to have this personal interaction. We need to feel like we're a part of. And that is a big component of finding meaning in life. It focuses on responsibility, freedom, pursuit of what matters. So that's Dr. Wong's therapy. Another one is meaning-centered psychotherapy, and most of that work was done in patients who had cancer. And you know, I highlighted the word identity, and you're going to see that in the next couple as well. Really, what these therapies do is it changes my personal identity, and it helps me believe that I do matter, I am valued, and I have things that are valuable to other people. And when we have those things in life, when we have this altruism that we give because we want to, we give because we care, we always get more in return when we have that type of economy, right? And it's one of the ways that we find meaning that I'm going to talk to in several slides ahead now. So the next one is short-term life review. Another one that focuses just on identity. Who are you? Right? That's a really interesting question. I can remember years ago, I had someone ask me that question, and my response was, at the time, I was like, well, I'm a son and I'm a father and I'm an employee and I'm a friend. And they were like, no, 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 no. Those are roles you play. But who are you? Right? What a great question. And I encourage you to ponder that. Who are you at the core? I think most people don't know how to answer that. And it takes some thought. It takes some research. It might take some reading to really begin to learn what goes on in here. In my head, I can tell you those things that I am, but who am I in here? And those are the things. That is the person that matters. That's the person that can connect. That's the person that can make a difference. That's the person that can thrive despite having Parkinson's, cancer, losing a spouse, losing a kid, right? All of these things that are terrible on the surface. But when you look at the people who experience loss in their lives, and that's why I go to Viktor Frankl, I can't imagine, I've never encountered someone who's had more loss than him. When he went to Auschwitz, everyone in his family went on one train, and he went on another train, and they went to be exterminated, and he lived. And he spent his time in Auschwitz. He was also in another one. I can't think of the name of it right now. I'm drawing a blank. But he spent his time there talking about what it was like and the atrocities that took place there. It's bad enough he just lost his whole family, right? Never to see him again. And what he had to encounter there, what he had to witness there, and figuring out along the way, what was the difference between the people who survived and the people who succumbed to those atrocities, he said, was having something to live for. Something to live for when you get out. And it's powerful. And that's why I'm very passionate about Viktor Frankl. He's got several books out, but some of them haven't been translated from German into English yet. But Man's Search for Meaning is at the very top of my list of the most influential books I've ever read. So I strongly
can I just interrupt here real quick?
Please.
One of the things that worked for him, he had just finished a manuscript for a new book when he was incarcerated, or when he was taken away, and the manuscript was destroyed. And for him, he reconstructed it on scraps of paper. It gave him a meaning, something to live for, was putting this book back together. And if you can imagine, on little scraps of paper, he's reconstructing this entire book. But it gave him something to do, something to live for.
That's right. Thank you, Sharon. That's a great point. I could sit here and talk for 2 hours about Viktor Frankl because he's just such an impressive man. And his work has meant so much to the world of counseling, psychotherapy, all of the medical profession, really. Even people who follow some of the precepts of Frankl have no idea that it's Viktor Frankl's work. So it's a meaningful thing. So the last one that I just pulled up there, meaning-making interventions. These things are all very similar. What happens in the world of research is all of us who do research love to have something that we do that has our name on it, and we can call it ours. And that's what happens. You've got meaning therapy that Wong created, and then Breitbart and colleagues came along and they changed it just a little bit. And so now they can call it theirs. At the end of the day, most of these things are very similar. It's about finding a sense of self. It's about finding your identity. Who are you inside, right? That question that I was asking. Oh, not forwarding, fix that. So, Joel Voss is a guy that's done some meta-analyses looking at meaning-making intervention. A meta-analysis, for you all who may not know, is they take all of the studies that have been done on interventions to improve meaning in life. They combine all those studies. They do a lot of stuff behind the scenes. They have to have a way that you can compare them across studies. And it's an arduous task, to say the least, to do a meta-analysis. But they bring all these studies together. And then I think I'm actually a slide ahead of myself, but I'm telling you nonetheless. They bring all of these studies together and they evaluate what was the end result of the compilation of studies. And that's what Joel Voss did. But like I said, a little ahead of myself. So there are 30 separate meaning interventions that you can find, right? I just gave you 4. And what did they find in all of these? Now, an effect size is a statistical way to look at what is the effect that a meaning in life intervention has on a given outcome. For here, the outcome was quality of life. And you can look at a small, medium, large effect size. The bigger the effect size, the more effective that intervention was on that outcome. So hopefully that makes sense. So we have a large effect size for quality of life, large effect size for self-efficacy, social well-being, hope and optimism, psychological stress. Oh, let me back up one. So what I'm saying here is, through looking at all of these 30 different meaning-focused therapies, you look at the outcome measures and they were all good. Increased quality of life, increased self-efficacy, increased social well-being, increased hope and optimism, and decrease psychological stress. Again, a pretty impressive list, right? I would argue that all of us could use some of these in our life right now, no matter where you're at, right? So this is what I was just talking about. Voss and Vitale, they did this meta-analysis looking at all of the therapies combined. And they're saying, what is the outcome that we can take from everything that's been done so far? The effect size was very large. Some of the common interventions that are used, aside from meaning therapies, are acceptance and commitment therapy. Cognitive behavioral therapy is another very common intervention that's used. And they're good, they're effective, but the meaning-based interventions were better. And because they're more specific, looking at these different areas of meaning. So now we get to the operative question. Brad, you tell us all this stuff. We need to have meaning in life. It has all of these great benefits, but how do I do it? Maybe I don't want to go sit across from a clinical psychologist or a counselor to have these interventions done. What do I do? These are some areas that we see in the literature that are commonly needed to develop meaning in life. Relationships is probably the #1 area that people report where they find the most meaning in their life. Up at the top, religion and spirituality, clearly you can understand where that has a role in meaning. What you do for a living, work, occupation, working on health, physical fitness, diet, nutrition. A lot of people find meaning in that. What about nature? You just enjoy being out. You've got a stream that you like to go for walks by the stream and listen to the birds and just enjoy nature. That's beautiful. Getting more educated, right? Going back to school, studying something just for fun because you just want to study it. Being involved in a community, right? What you all are involved in as we speak right now, right? This community is imperative, and you probably didn't even realize it was helping you find meaning in your life, but it is. Organizations and activities, right? What about volunteering? You know, we talk about work, and work does not have to be paid, competitive paid employment. Work can be, you know what? And I think I shared this with Sharon. My mom is 70, getting ready to be 76. And she volunteers a day at a week at a shelter for homeless people. And they have a store there where people come and donate goods that they no longer want, and they give them to the people who are homeless. And she loves it. She spends 8 hours every Tuesday hanging out there, talking to these guys, listening to their stories, how they've struggled, helping them. She and my dad have helped guys who have gotten out of the homeless shelter and found a place to live, to take some of the goods that are there and get them moved to their new place. It's really meaningful to her to be able to do that, to help another person. Hobbies. What things do you like? Do you like to read? Do you like to knit? Do you like to crochet? Whatever those things are, those things can bring meaning in our lives. So the action steps. Think about that list I just gave you right here. How are things in your life right now in those areas? And we think about the same question is, how do you feel like your meaning in life is? Have you lost something and you're struggling and you need to find it? So we have to really be critical of ourselves and what's going on in our life today to be able to decide what to do next. And do more of what you deem meaningful, right? There's a solution-focused therapy is an intervention that's used in counseling and psychotherapy. And it's a really cool intervention because largely what the counselor tells the client is you find out what's working and you do more of it. And I ask you, is that working for you? And if you tell me no, I say, stop it, right? It's very practical. Find these areas that you enjoy, that bring you pleasure, that you find meaningful, spend time doing more of them, right? That's the first step. Again, I go back to this is what you guys are doing now. Engage in activities with others. We know that we see there's a benefit in meaning when we interact with other people and we have these deep interpersonal connections, particularly when we have this one thing in common, like all of you ladies do, right? There's this one thing, the odds of you guys meeting each other outside of Parkinson's disease is probably slim to none, right? Odds are not good that you ever would have crossed paths. I dare say that you guys have some good friendships as a result of having Parkinson's disease.
Mhm.
And friendships that you might say could be better than friendships you ever had before you had PD, because there's something that's pulling you together. You have a common goal. How can we help people live better with PD? That's the ultimate question. That's why Sharon does what she does. She's trying to give you what she hears, give you what she learns, and say, hey, I think that's a good idea. Let's give it to the rest of the ladies and let's run with it. That's what matters. And Sharon and I haven't talked about this, but I can promise you this gives her meaning in her life. We've never had that
Absolutely.
conversation, but I know
Ellie, but it
100%.
absolutely, that was my comment I was going to say when you finished. Anyway,
Please step in. I've just got a few more slides, a couple more to go.
okay, yeah, we need to go to Q&A in a minute, so please, let's go.
Yep, I think I'm
Finish
right
up.
at the end. Share our experiences. Again, it's back to what y'all are doing, right? Talk about the wins, talk about the struggles, talk about the things that are working. Help others find their meaning, right? You guys have got this peer support network. You're helping other people progress in their life with Parkinson's disease. And we always think when I help someone else that I'm doing it, they're getting the benefit. I can tell you, I always get more out of helping someone else than they get. The feeling that I get of making a difference in someone's life, that's meaning, that's purpose, right? That's saying I have value. Practice regular self-reflection. Evaluate, am I doing these things that give me meaning in my life? Are there things that are pulling me away and that are negatively impacting me that I need to let go of, right? It's a balance. The last one's read inspirational books. Get Viktor Frankl's book. There are tons of books that you can find on people who have gone through suffering and have come out the other side and are different. And that's it. I hope there were some things that, you know, that caused you guys to think, and maybe moving forward, you can begin to get more meaning in your life, I guess is what I'm looking at. But Sharon, I'll kick it back to you.
Okay, I have one question in the chat. Well, one comment from Carol Reese, who encourages participants who feel ready to apply to be a mentor. And can you end your, okay, we need to end your screen sharing. If you are mentoring someone, it really helps it boosts your self-esteem because you know that you're helping someone else. It's really a wonderful way to find some meaning in your life and help someone else. Joan Swirsky asks, was the causal relationship between meaning and positive emotions proved, or is it only an association? For example, maybe healthier people are able to find meaning, so the cause is health, not meaning.
No, the studies are very clear that it's meaning that caused those outcomes. You know, most of those, and I'm having trouble getting this to exit, the same problems you were having getting me to share.
Yeah.
It's not wanting to exit here. So
you want to go to the bottom, and there we go. Okay,
finally.
Great.
Yeah. So what they do whenever they look at these types of relationships, and you know, it's a great question, because we always have to be concerned when we see claims like that. You know, are they correlational claims? Do we just say that there's a relationship between meaning in life and happiness? Yeah, we could say that, and that'd probably get published. But the question becomes, is it a bi-directional relationship? Can you say that people who are happier have more meaning? Probably. But you can also say that people that have more meaning are happier. So which way does that go? And that's when most of these studies that have been done, before we were able to say that, we had to do a statistical technique looking at multiple regression, where we control for a whole bunch of variables, and we only leave the variable meaning in life, and we evaluate controlling for everything else: happiness, depression, anxiety, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We're only looking at meaning in life and the outcome. And when we did that, we saw that there were robust results, robust numbers looking at that relationship. So good question, though.
Okay. many of you may remember we had Linda K. Olson speak. Linda is a triple amputee, probably the most inspirational person any of us has ever seen. And please go to the website. You can watch the video. She was amazing. So let's see, any advice on balancing free time with volunteer activities? I book myself up with volunteer activities, which I find meaningful. Sometimes I would enjoy putting my feet up and relaxing now that I'm retired, but perhaps then that's an illusion. The busier I am, the better I feel. There's no time for rest. You can rest later. Enjoy life while that's kind of my philosophy on this. And I have to tell you, for me, writing the blog, which I've been doing for 6 years, and then starting this group has done more for me than anything else I've ever done in my life. And we started it because I knew that loneliness was a problem. And it was for me and for everybody else, because my release for Parkinson's was going to exercise classes with other people with Parkinson's, and I could talk to them, and we knew each other, we understood each other. That was taken away from us overnight. And how could we substitute for that? And this has worked for a lot of people, I think, and in the Tuesday mornings as well, and our mentor program. It just keeps growing and growing, and the number of women who are joining us are growing and growing because they don't know anyone else with Parkinson's, and they need a place to turn to and see other women who are doing okay and have a chance to talk to them. And it helps get you through a lot of that initial shock and give you something to look forward to.
Yeah, and along those same lines, Sharon, that the literature that you read now, any of the medical research looking at the lockdown in Parkinson's disease, is really consistent across the board, that we've seen increased depression, increased anxiety, increased suicidal ideation, increased substance use, all because of the lockdowns and the loneliness. Mm-hmm. People are literally dying for a connection, wanting to be a part of it.
We have a question. How does this apply to introverts for whom many of these recommendations are problematic? Yeah. Just join us, be part of our group. You'll find comfort.
Yeah. And
being with others. Yeah.
Yeah. Just because that we probably have, I would almost guarantee out of the people we have on here, there are several introverts, but you're engaged in a group. Doesn't mean that you have to be in Sharon's shoes, sitting and doing the talking. That's okay. Your presence here makes this group stronger. And that's the role that we can do from an introvert standpoint. And remember that when I gave you that list of all the areas that you can find meaning, if you're an introvert, relationships may not be your number one meaning area. It might be nature. It might be that you just enjoy going out on your back porch and grabbing a book, and that's the area that you feel really connected and purpose. And that's okay. And that's the great, computer went. That's a great thing about meaning, is it's whatever it is to you. The way I find meaning may not work for anybody else on this call. And the way Sharon finds meaning may not work for anybody else, but it's up to you, and it's open to everyone.
Okay, Barbara asks, meaning in life is one thing, but finding meaning in chronic illness is another.
Yeah, it is. And that's kind of where I started at the beginning, right? Because the struggle that we have, anyone who has a diagnosis of a chronic illness, right? Parkinson's disease, changes your life. And it changes expectations. It changes it maybe not early on, but eventually it probably begins to change the things that you can do. And you may not be able to do all the things you want to do. But what it allows us to do is shift and find meaning in other ways that we may not have ever considered. I don't know Sharon's past. I don't know if this was something that you ever saw yourself doing, but all of a sudden you had a PD diagnosis and you said, wow, there's a need for this, and you did it. And I would argue, because you're so committed, that this is an area that you find a ton of meaning in.
Yeah, I do. And, I didn't do anything for 5 years after my diagnosis.
Yeah.
Nothing. I just kept going to my yoga classes. I stayed away from Parkinson's classes, Parkinson's speak talks, everything, and didn't tell anybody. And then one day it was like, people started calling me. They figured it out and were calling me, can you talk to so-and-so? And I found I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
So
And
if anybody ever asks you to speak to a newly diagnosed person, please do so, because it will help you as well as it helps the newly diagnosed person. There are several women on this call today who called me up and said, I've never met anyone else with Parkinson's. And I met with them and they were like, oh, you mean I can live okay? And I was like, yeah, keep doing what you're doing. And you'll find that just that interaction, whether you're an introvert or not, you don't have to be an extrovert to go out to coffee with someone who is asking for help.
And that, to her question about, chronic illness and meaning, that's one of the reasons that I'm so adamant about sharing about Viktor Frankl. That guy went through more in his life than I would argue any of us are ever going to go through.
Yeah.
That's an extreme example of a guy who none of us probably would have blamed him for giving up. And he didn't. And I think to myself now, we all have the struggles. The struggles are different, but each one of us has them. And it's, what do I do despite that struggle? And we build resilience as a result of fighting and pushing and keeping going. Resilience is that's a whole nother talk. I've given that talk before too. And that's on a whole nother level, but resilience is critical for getting through chronic illness. And Paul Wong is a big proponent of flourishing through suffering. He believes that when we suffer, we have the greatest opportunity to flourish on the other side of it, so long as we don't give up. And I believe that's true.
All right. Well, thank you. I'm going to wrap up, and then for those who want to stay on afterwards, you're welcome to. Okay. So thank you. This was most informational. It was really wonderful. I think everybody got a lot out of this. We're going to be talking a lot in the next few months about the unmet needs of women with Parkinson's. And Indu Subramanian is right here. This is my doctor who Bradley was talking about. She and two other movement disorder specialists and 3 professional women who have Parkinson's did a study on the unmet needs of women living with PD, which is actually a follow-up to a study that I was involved in through the Parkinson's Foundation about 5 years ago. So you can go to PMD Alliance and listen to watch their talk. It was last week. It was wonderful. And they are going to be joining us sometime in April to talk about it with our group. So something to look forward to. And let's keep going. And they're also doing it in Spanish tomorrow. For those of you who prefer to watch it in Spanish, the information is here. If you're interested in this program, just email me and I will send you the link for it. I'm working with a group of women from around the world right now to unite all the different women's groups with Parkinson's from everywhere. And there's a big group in Spain called Campi de Parkinson, and they are sponsoring a lot of things that are going on. March 8th is International Women's Day, and we have this in English and Spanish, and you'll be hearing more about this. And this is the pose. And we want to break the bias about women in Parkinson's, why women take so long to get diagnosed, why it's harder to get diagnosed. So we're going to talk about what you can do. And upcoming programs on Sunday mornings. In 2 weeks, we have Deborah Magid and Zach Grant, who is her son. We'll talk about their film Shake With Me. And it's a wonderful film about Deborah's journey with Parkinson's. She's an artist and does amazing portraits. And you should watch the film before they speak. And all of that is in the information that you get when you register. March 20th is our 2nd anniversary. So we are going to laugh and laugh with Twitchy Women and celebrate 2 years of Sunday mornings. And with that, we have Carol Klubney, Naomi, the Queen of Cranes, and myself. We will have lots of surprises. I will read to you what Carol sent me. Parkinson stinks. Even though we can't smell it, grab your Glade, Lysol, and Febreze and get ready to spray the odor away. If you have been looking for relief from PD in all the wrong places, turn your antennas to twitchy women. So we're going to have an extended meeting that day. We are going to have prizes like we did giveaways last year. We did that at our first anniversary. We will have them again this year, including some t-shirts that I still have. We are going to have some fun and games and breakout groups and fundraising. You'll hear more about that as we get closer. And lots of surprises. And then on March 27th, Stacy Macaluso from Prime PD will follow. This is really a follow-up to Daniel Korkos, who talked about exercise. She's going to show you how you can find the right exercise program for your needs, both live and online. And then you heard a little bit this morning about Open Mic Tuesdays with Shelley and Darlene. And this is a group that was started by two of our younger women. And you can talk about anything you want to. And if you're interested, in attending, if you're not on the email list for them, go to Shelley@savoy4.com and she will add you to the list. They meet every Tuesday. And a couple more things, just real quickly. I'm changing my email program, so you may get some multiple emails, ignore them. Thank you again for making Sunday Mornings with Twitchy Women the best program out there for women with Parkinson's, and we will see you again in 2 weeks.